When Carlo Gambino died of natural causes at home on October 15, 1976, he chose Paul Castellano to succeed him over his underboss Aniello Neil Della Croce. However, when Della Croce died of cancer on December 2, 1985, a chain of events would start and not end well for the new crime boss. On Monday, December 16, 1985, Castellano was headed to a prearranged early evening meeting at Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. As Castellano was exiting the car at the front of the restaurant at around 5:26 p.m., gunmen ran up and shot him several times, ultimately ending his life. Welcome back. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Past Crimes channel, and don't forget to leave us a comment below to let us know what your thoughts at the end of this episode. Castellano was born in 1915 in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, to Italian immigrants Giuseppe and Concetta Castellano. His full birth name was Constantino Paul Castellano, but often signed his name as C. Paul Castellano because he hated his first name. Giuseppe was a butcher and an early member of the Mangano crime family, the forerunner of the Gambino family. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade to learn butchering from his father and collecting numbers game receipts from him. He was arrested for the first time in July 1934 in Hartford, Connecticut for robbing a haberdasher. The 19-year-old Castellano was sentenced to 3 months in prison after refusing to identify his 2 accomplices to police. His reputation for mob loyalty grew as a result of his refusal to cooperate with authorities. Castellano became a member of the Mangano family in the 1940s when Albert Anastasia, the successor to boss Vince Mangano, promoted him to capo. After Anastasia's murder and Carlo Gambino's promotion to boss, Castellano attended the ill-fated Appalachian meeting in Appalachian, New York, in 1957. He was one of 61 high-ranking mobsters arrested when New York State Police raided the meeting. He spent a year in prison on contempt charges after refusing to answer grand jury questions about the meeting. Castellano was sentenced to 5 years in prison for conspiracy to withhold information on January 13, 1960. However, his conviction was overturned by an appeals court in November 1960. He was identified as a businessman rather than a hoodlum. He took over illegal businesses and converted them to legal ones. However, Castellano's and his son's businesses benefited from their mob connections. Castellano used his butcher training to start Dial Poultry, a poultry distribution company that once supplied 300 butchers in New York City. Customers of Dial included the supermarket chains, Key Food, and Waldbaum's, and used intimidation to persuade his customers to buy Dial's products. As Castellano grew in power within the Gambino family, he began to make large sums of money from construction concrete. Castellano's son, Philip, was the president of Scaramix Concrete Corporation, which had a near monopoly on construction concrete on Staten Island. Castellano was also in charge of the Gambino interests in the Concrete Club, a group of contractors chosen by the commission to handle contracts ranging from $2 million to $15 million. In exchange, the contractors gave the commission a 2% kickback on the contract value. Castellano also oversaw Gambino's control of Teamsters Union Local Chapter 282, which provided workers to pour concrete at all major New York and Long Island construction projects. In 1975, Castellano allegedly murdered Vito Borelli, the boyfriend of his daughter Constance, after hearing Borelli compare him to Frank Perdue, the owner and commercial spokesman for Perdue Farms. According to court documents, in 2004, Joseph Massino, a government witness and former Bonanno crime family boss, admitted to murdering Borelli as a favor to Castellano. When Carlo Gambino died of natural causes at home on October 15, 1976, he chose Paul Castellano to succeed him over his underboss Aniello Neil Della Croce. Gambino appeared to believe that Castellano's focus on white-collar businesses would benefit his crime family. Della Croce was imprisoned at the time for tax evasion and was unable to challenge Castellano's succession. Castellano's succession was confirmed at a meeting on November 24, which included Della Croce. He arranged for Della Croce to keep his position as underboss while directly carrying out traditional Cosa Nostra activities like extortion, robbery, and loansharking. While Della Croce accepted Castellano's succession, the agreement effectively divided the Gambino family into two opposing factions. Castellano is accused of ordering the murder of Gambino associate Nicholas Schibetta in 1978. Schibetta, a cocaine and alcohol user, was involved in several public fights and insulted George DeCicco's daughter. Because Schibetta was Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano's brother-in-law, Castellano requested that Frank DeCicco notify Gravano of the impending hit first. When told of Schibetta's fate, Gravano became enraged and declared that he would kill Castellano first. Gravano was eventually calmed down by DeCicco and accepted Schibetta's death as the punishment for his actions. Again, Castellano is accused of ordering the murders of Gambino capo James Ippolito and his son, mobster James Ippolito Jr., in 1978. Ippolito Sr. had complained to Castellano that Anthony Gaggi was invading his territory and had requested permission to kill him. Ippolito received a non-committal response from Castellano, who later warned Gaggi about Ippolito's intentions. Gaggi and soldier Roy DeMeo retaliated by murdering both father and son. Castellano arranged a deal between the Gambino family and the Westies, an Irish-American gang from Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan, in February 1978. He wanted hitmen who could not be directly linked to the Gambino family, and the Westies wanted Gambino's safety from the other Cosa Nostra families. A meeting between Westies leader James Coonan and Castellano established the Gambino-Westies alliance. Castellano also formed an alliance with the Cherry Hill Gambinos, a New Jersey-based group of Sicilian heroin importers and distributors, to use as gunmen. He now commanded a small army of capable killers with the Westies and the Cherry Hill Gambinos. He also allegedly ordered the murder of his former son-in-law Frank Amato in September 1980. Amato, a hijacker and minor criminal, had physically abused his wife Connie Castellano, Paul's daughter, during their marriage. According to FBI documents, Gambino soldier Roy DeMeo murdered Amato, dismembered his body, and threw the remains into the sea. While capos such as Thomas Gambino and James Fila had to visit Castellano at Toad Hill to provide information and receive orders, Castellano became a recluse, rarely venturing outside his mansion he built to resemble the White House, and walked around the house in satin and silk dressing gowns and velvet slippers when he wasn't entertaining guests. Della Croce's former protege, John Gotti, quickly became dissatisfied with Castellano's leadership, viewing the new boss as too isolated and greedy. Gotti, like the other members of the family, disliked Castellano. The boss lacked street credibility, and those who had earned their keep working on the streets did not respect him. Gotti and Castellano had a running argument about the split Gotti took from hijackings at Kennedy Airport. Gotti was also rumored to be expanding into the lucrative drug trade, which Castellano had prohibited. Castellano allegedly ordered the murder of Roy DeMeo, who was found shot to death in the trunk of his Cadillac in January 1983. The FBI obtained a warrant in March 1983 to install secret listening devices in Castellano's home. Agents drugged Castellano's watchdogs, disabled his security system, and planted devices in his dining and living rooms while he was on vacation in Florida. These devices gave authorities a tremendous amount of incriminating information about Castellano. Angelo Ruggiero and Gene Gotti were arrested for heroin dealing in August 1983, based primarily on recordings from a bug in Ruggiero's house. Castellano, who had prohibited made men from his family from dealing drugs under threat of death, demanded transcripts of the tapes and threatened to demote Gotti if Ruggiero refused. On March 30, 1984, Castellano was indicted on federal racketeering charges in the Gambino case, which included the Ippolito and DeMeo murders. Extortion, narcotics trafficking, theft, and prostitution were among the other charges. He was released on $2 million bail. On February 25, 1985, he was one of many mafia bosses arrested on racketeering charges that would lead to the Mafia Commission trial. He was released on $3 million bail. Castellano was charged with loan sharking and tax evasion on July 1, 1985. On November 4, 1985, in a testimony from car thief Vito Borelli, Castellano was named the head of the stolen car ring that employed him, as well as having been connected to 5 murders. Della Croce died of cancer on December 2, 1985, setting in motion a series of events. Several factors contributed to the plot to assassinate Castellano. His failure to attend Della Croce's wake was an insult to the Della Croce family and followers. Second, Castellano appointed his bodyguard Thomas Bellotti to the position of underboss. Bellotti, a Castellano loyalist, was a brutish loan shark with little diplomatic skill required as underboss, and Castellano also hinted that he was dismantling Gotti's gang. On Monday, December 16, 1985, Castellano was headed to a prearranged early evening meeting at Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. As Castellano was exiting the car at the front of the restaurant at around 5:26 p.m., gunmen ran up and shot him several times, ultimately ending his life.